Professor Thevar's 17 eyes had observed 3,147 species fail basic xenobiology protocols. None prepared him for the impossibility bleeding across his laboratory table. Zara Okafor, the human exchange student, had just donated precisely 47.3 milliliters of her crimson life fluid to the necrotic Vraxian tissue sample, a standard death confirmation exercise. Every species in the Consortium Medical Academy understood dead cells remained dead. Universal biological law, irrefutable, yet the gray flesh writhed. Cellular regeneration cascaded across the sample at rates that shattered Professor Thevar's instruments. Dead tissue suddenly pulsed with impossible life, temperature climbing from 12 degrees C to a shocking 15 degrees C in 47 seconds. "Professor," whispered Zeltnara, her chromatophores flashing terror patterns. "The human's blood, it's rewriting death itself." Around the amphitheater, medical students from 14 star systems pressed closer, their various breathing apparatus hissing in disbelief. Zara felt their 17 pairs of eyes boring into her, some horrified, others calculating her worth like a lab specimen. She'd seen that look before on Earth, in the trauma wards where her O-negative blood type made the difference between life and death. Just another Tuesday, she thought, letting a small smile play at her lips. Professor Thevar's primary neural cluster trembled. In 6 centuries of teaching galactic medicine, he'd never witnessed organic matter reject entropy. Yet this fragile primate from Sol 3 had just made resurrection routine. The implications would shatter everything the Consortium believed about biological limitations. Professor Thevar's crystalline appendages traced the Academy's hierarchy chart with practiced arrogance. 12,000 species, 47 star systems, one undisputable truth. Evolutionary superiority determined medical advancement. Vraxians commanded the apex, their silicon-based physiology processing information at 2.4 terahertz, lifespans reaching 3,000 standard cycles. Beneath them, the Kepler-born Zephirites manipulated electromagnetic fields to heal cellular damage instantly. Even the lowest-tier Consortium species possessed redundant organs, toxin immunity, or natural regeneration. Zara Okafor sat in the back row, her primitive carbon-based frame registering as barely sentient on Academy sensors. Humans rated 847th out of 12,000, above only the extinct and the dying. "Death World survivors," Thevar clicked to his assistant, loud enough for the human to hear. "Tell me, student Okafor, how does it feel knowing your entire species wouldn't survive one rotation on a civilized world?" The amphitheater rippled with chittering laughter. Zara's pulse quickened, not from fear, but anticipation. "Depends, Professor. How does it feel knowing your civilized species can't heal a paper cut without medical intervention?" The laughter died. Thevar's 17 eyes narrowed. Yet something nagged at his superior intellect. Yesterday's regeneration demonstration defied every biological law. Blood shouldn't resurrect dead tissue. Carbon-based organisms shouldn't possess such impossible resilience. Zara's heartbeat, detected at an alarming 72 beats per minute, remained steady, impossibly, disturbingly steady. Emergency klaxons shrieked through the Consortium Medical Academy's crystalline halls. Professor Thevar's neural clusters pulsed crimson as the data streams flooded in. 7 core worlds, 43 billion sentients, all dying from the same pathogen. "Hemorrhagic Cascade syndrome," the Academy's diagnostics announced. "Estimated extinction timeline, 72 standard hours." Zara Okafor stood among the trembling graduate students, her primitive human heart somehow steady at 72 beats per minute. Around her, Vraxian minds calculated probabilities of survival, all zeros. Cathari respiratory sacs collapsed from panic. Even the cybernetic Nexari displayed error cascades. The pathogen targets hemoglobin, Professor Thevar explained, his voice carrying the weight of impending galactic catastrophe. It dissolves oxygen transport at the molecular level. No known cure exists. Zara's hands trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. Every instinct screamed at her to offer help. 43 billion lives. She stepped forward. The scanners reacted to her approach, alarms chirping as her biosignature registered. "Professor," she said quietly, "my species has survived hemorrhagic fevers for millennia. Ebola, Marburg, Lassa fever. We've developed natural resistance to blood-based pathogens. Perhaps." Thevar's dismissive gesture silenced her. His 17 eyes didn't even focus on her face. Student Okafor, humanity's survival of primitive diseases is irrelevant to advanced pathology. This is a molecular-level cascade affecting species far superior to yours. Return to your seat. Another inferior species offering delusions of grandeur. He had 43 billion lives to save. No time for human fantasies. Zara Okafor's cellular regeneration proposal triggered 3 separate warning alarms across Professor Thevar's neural interface. The Consortium Medical Academy's finest minds, 11 species representing 400,000 years of accumulated knowledge, sat in stunned silence. "Impossible," hissed Dr. Velnara through her breathing apparatus. "Human blood cannot resurrect necrotic tissue. Death is absolute." Zara pressed her palm against the holographic display, her biosignature pulsing steadily, 72 beats per minute, a rhythm that should have killed her through cardiac overload by consortium standards. "Your mistake," she said softly, "is assuming we follow your rules." Professor Thevar's compound eyes dilated. Humans, the galaxy's most persistent delusion. Their homeworld's crushing gravity should have compressed their bones to powder. Their toxic atmosphere should have corroded their lungs. Yet here stood this impossible creature, proposing that death itself could be reversed. "Student Okafor," Thevar's voice crackled through universal translation. "Your species survived one backwards planet through evolutionary accident. Do not mistake luck for science." "Luck?" Zara's voice carried an edge now. "We didn't luck into surviving. We adapted, evolved, overcame. Every disease that should have killed us made us stronger." She gestured to the data on the display. "Your species engineered yourselves into perfection. Mine clawed our way there through trial and error." Dr. Velnara leaned forward, her breathing apparatus hissing. "Motion to expel the human student for promoting unscientific methodology." Zara watched each alien professor's bioluminescent patterns flash agreement, rejection, dismissal. She thought of her grandmother's words. "When they won't listen to your mind, child, show them with your hands." "Fine," Zara said quietly, gathering her materials. "But when your patients die, remember you chose pride over proof." Neural probe 47 alpha pierced Zara Okafor's temporal lobe without anesthetic. Professor Thevar's instruments registered tissue displacement of 0.3 millimeters, sufficient to paralyze most sentient species for cycles. Standard protocol dictated unconsciousness within 2.7 seconds. Zara felt the probe's cold metal pierce her skull, a sharp electric burn that would have sent most beings into shock. Her grandmother's voice echoed. "Pain is just your body talking, child. Listen, but don't let it control you." The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. She blinked away tears, smiled at the horrified faces around her, and croaked, Could I get some water? This always makes me thirsty. Assistant Surgeon Velcrin's chromatophores flashed crimson disbelief. The human's pain receptors are firing at 847% normal threshold, she whispered to Professor Thevar. Neural trauma indicators show catastrophic damage, yet the subject maintains consciousness and humor? Zara's vitals painted the monitoring array in impossible contradictions. Stress hormones surged while her heartbeat remained steady. Electrical brain activity spiked while she discussed lunch plans with visiting researchers. The Vraxian intern fainted when Zara casually mentioned her wisdom teeth removal. 4 simultaneous surgical extractions performed while conscious on her primitive death world. Your species experiences this regularly. Professor Thevar's voice carried 3 octaves of bewilderment. Oh, that's nothing, Zara laughed, neural probe still embedded in her skull. Wait until you meet someone who's given birth. Natural childbirth can last 20 hours, without anesthetic. 6 alien medical students required emergency sedation. Professor Thevar's scanning apparatus detected 17 biological impossibilities in Zara Okafor's left arm. The human had deliberately lacerated her flesh with a consortium scalpel, a demonstration deemed suicidal by the Academy's finest minds. Standard galactic tissue required 72 standard hours minimum for cellular reconstruction. Advanced species like the Vraxians needed 18 hours under optimal conditions. Zara's wound sealed in 12 minutes, not healed, sealed. New skin cells multiplied at rates that violated thermodynamic law. Her blood, that crimson death world aberration, carried oxygen at concentrations that should have poisoned her nervous system. Instead, it accelerated the healing process beyond all scientific understanding. Impossible, whispered Dr. Kenthera, the Academy's leading xenobiologist. Her 4 optical sensors focused on Zara's arm, searching for hidden technology, genetic modification, or outright deception. Nothing. Pure human biology had just demonstrated regenerative capabilities that surpassed the consortium's most advanced medical nanobots. The assembled professors exchanged horrified glances through their bioluminescent communication nodes. If humans could heal this rapidly, what other death world capabilities had they underestimated? Zara recognized their expressions. The same fear disguised as skepticism she'd seen on Earth when experimental treatments defied expectations. My mom used to say the best teachers make their students uncomfortable, Zara said softly, already preparing another scalpel. Ready for lesson 2? Patient Cathara registered 0 neural activity for 847 standard minutes. Professor Thevar and the Consortium Medical Academy had declared cerebral death, irreversible across 1,247 documented species. Yet Zara Okafor continued her barbaric procedure. Primitive needles, unrefined cellular matter extracted from her own bone marrow. The human stem cells, chaotic, undifferentiated death world abominations, flooded Cathara's necrotic brain tissue. Thevar's sensors screamed warnings. Temperature, 40 Fortierings. Cellular mitosis rate, 340% above theoretical maximums. Impossible. Then, Cathara's cranial ridges flickered with bioluminescence. The first neural activity in 14 hours. Professor, whispered medical technician Vexil, the synaptic pathways, they're reconstructing themselves. Thevar's 4 hearts synchronized in terror. Human cellular regeneration didn't just heal, it rewrote biological law. Cathara's eyes opened, pupils dilating with restored consciousness. She spoke her first word, Zara. Zara's vision blurred as the extraction needle withdrew from her hip. The pain was sharp. Bone marrow extraction always was, but she barely noticed. Her neural stem cells now flowed into Cathara's dying brain, carrying the same regenerative properties that had helped humans survive 1,000,000 years of evolution. Mom would have done the same, she thought, remembering the Doctors Without Borders patch on her mother's old jacket. Remembered her mother's words. If you can help, you help. That's all there is to it. Pain was temporary. Death was supposed to be permanent. But supposed to be and actually being were very different things. "Welcome back," Zara whispered, squeezing Cathara's hand. Professor Thevar stared at his instruments, at the impossible readings, at the human student who had just conquered death itself. Humans didn't just cure disease. They refused to accept biological limitations. Professor Thevar's 6 hearts stopped beating in sequence. Across the Consortium Medical Academy's sterile amphitheater, 14 species witnessed the impossible. Zara Okafor's blood sample had just reversed cellular death in organisms from 12 different star systems. Not slowed, not prevented, reversed. Quantum cellular reconstruction, breathed senior researcher Kavlon, her crystalline exoskeleton trembling. The human's platelets are rewriting genetic decay patterns at the molecular level. Zara stood at the demonstration table, watching the monitors with clinical detachment. Her casual blood draw, a procedure that would kill most sapient beings, contained enzymes that shouldn't exist. Her hemoglobin carried oxygen concentrations that would poison Vraxian neural networks. Her white blood cells attacked pathogens with predatory intelligence. Professor Thevar watched his life's work crumble. The Academy had cataloged 40,000 diseases across the galaxy, classified them, accepted their inevitability. Yet this Death World student from Sol 3 possessed antibodies that treated every pathogen like a personal insult. "Universal biological compatibility," Thevar whispered, understanding finally dawning. "Every plague, every genetic curse, every terminal diagnosis we've accepted as natural law could have solutions written into human DNA." Zara caught Professor Thevar staring at her like she was a walking impossibility. She glanced at her watch. Advanced biochemistry in 20 minutes, but these aliens needed time to process what they'd witnessed. "Should I collect more samples?" she asked, already reaching for another vial. "Or do you need a moment to rewrite your textbooks?" The amphitheater remained silent, except for the hum of instruments processing impossible data. 47 species ruled the galaxy. None questioned the Consortium's medical doctrine. Until Zara Okafor stood before the High Council, her primitive human heart beating at an impossible 72 beats per minute under crushing 2.4 G pressure that would liquefy Zalithian organs. Counselor Vexithara's chromatophores flashed crimson disbelief. Human cellular regeneration violates thermodynamic law. Death is irreversible across 14 billion star systems. This is established science. Professor Thevar stood beside his student, his 17 eyes trained on the council. "Counselor, the Consortium Medical Academy has spent 3 millennia cataloging biological limitations. Yet student Okafor's blood samples continue dividing in containment chambers designed to sterilize Vraxian plague spores. Her stem cells ignore entropy itself." "Anecdotal evidence," scoffed Counselor Zephrun, mandibles clicking skepticism. "Integration protocols demand genetic compatibility testing. Humans share 0.3% genetic markers with accepted species. They are fundamentally incompatible with galactic biology." Zara's response shattered galactic medical orthodoxy. She sliced her palm with the ceremonial blade offered during council testimony, pain that would cripple most sentients. Crimson drops hit the council floor, the sound echoing in the vast chamber. 47 species watched. Within 47 seconds, new tissue sealed the wound completely. No scarring, no inflammation, perfect regeneration. Counselor Vexithara's chromatophores flashed angry red. Parlor tricks prove nothing. Impossible is impossible, human. Physics doesn't negotiate. Tell that to my grandmother, Zara replied, feeling her spine compress under the crushing gravity. Each word took effort. She survived 3 cancers that your medical texts classify as terminal: stage 4 melanoma, pancreatic adenocarcinoma, glioblastoma. She met each alien gaze directly. Your tests measure what should be possible according to your evolution. Mine measure what actually happens on a death world. Silence engulfed the chamber. Evolution itself was being rewritten by a death world aberration who smiled at impossibility. Across 17 dying worlds, Professor Thevar monitored the impossible through quantum-linked bioscanners. Zara Okafor's hybrid serum, combining human stem cells with consortium nanotechnology, should have failed within standard cycles. Instead, resurrection bloomed across entire star systems. Vraxian children, clinically dead for rotations, drew first breaths on oxygen-starved colonies. Zilithian elders, their crystalline hearts shattered by the plague, regenerated cellular matrices that defied thermodynamic law. On Kepler 442b, mass graves emptied as human-modified treatments reversed cellular decay at the molecular level. Impossible, Thevar whispered, watching real-time mortality statistics plummet across the galactic network. Death rates 94%, 73%, 48%, 27%, 12%, within solar hours. The Academy's predictive models shattered like quantum glass. In the medical bay, Zara's hand shook as she prepared another plasma sample. The recycled air tasted like copper and ozone. Fever made everything shimmer at the edges. Each donation left her weaker, her blood count dropping, bone marrow depleted, neural fatigue setting in. But she could feel the lives connecting across space. Children breathing on worlds that had been morgues hours ago. Families reunited, hope spreading like wildfire. Just like Mom, she thought, remembering late nights in the refugee clinic. One more patient, always one more. How does she survive giving so much? Junior Medic Vexhi asked, watching Zara's biosignature flicker with exhaustion. Thevar studied the bioscans showing Zara's impossible physiology, adapting, healing, thriving under stress that would kill any consortium species in minutes. She doesn't just survive, he admitted, his 17 eyes reflecting something new, reverence. She multiplies her strength through sacrifice. It's not biology, it's will. 6 galactic cycles later, Professor Thevar observed the impossible. Mortality rates across 17 sectors had plummeted by 73%. Zara Okafor's human-derived protocols now operated in 2,147 medical facilities. Her cellular regeneration techniques saved species the Consortium had deemed beyond salvation. Alien physicians who once sneered at human biology now administered stem cell therapies with reverent precision. Vraxian burn victims healed using human growth factors. Zalathi neural degeneration reversed through human neuroplasticity studies. Even the proud Keth Mori sought human-inspired treatments for their crystalline bone disorders. Thevar's own research now bore the prefix HBio, Human Biology Integration. The Academy's most prestigious chairs required human physiology certification. Medical texts that once dismissed Earth's chaotic biology as primitive now featured human cellular mechanics as the gold standard. Zara, now Director of Interspecies Medical Innovation, stood before the Grand Assembly. Her human heart, that inefficient, emotional organ, beat steadily at 72 BPM, while she addressed beings whose civilizations spanned millennia. She looked out at the assembled beings, species who'd once dismissed her as primitive, now hanging on her every word. 6 cycles ago, she began, you laughed at human biology, called us weak, primitive, evolutionary accidents. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the chamber. Today, human-derived treatments operate in nearly 3,000 facilities. We've reduced mortality rates for diseases you'd accepted as inevitable, reversed conditions you'd classified as terminal. Silence in the vast chamber. Death, she declared, her voice carrying warmth that no translator could fully capture, was never as permanent as you believed. My species learned that through millennia of refusing to accept the inevitable, through stubborn hope and endless compassion. She smiled, that peculiar human expression that the galaxy had learned to recognize. We didn't just survive the impossible. We taught you to transcend it. Galactic Standard Cycle 2387.4. Professor Thevar's final Academy report documented the impossible. 17 core worlds, populations totaling 847 billion beings, lived because of Zara Okafor's Death World biology. Human healing centers now anchored every sector. Alien species crossed light years seeking Earth-born physicians. Zara stood before the reformed Consortium Medical Academy, no longer the dismissed xenobiology student from the back row. Her human stem cell research had rewritten galactic medicine. Where Vraxian logic failed, human intuition succeeded. Where Colothian precision faltered, human adaptation thrived. Professor Thevar observed the transformation with analytical wonder. Former superior species, the crystalline architects, plasma-based luminals, energy beings from Sector 9, all sought humanity's biological knowledge. Death itself had become negotiable in human hands. Your species defies our fundamental understanding, Thevar admitted, his 17 eyes reflecting genuine reverence. We measured intelligence by computational speed, strength by molecular density. We never considered measuring life by its refusal to surrender. Zara felt the weight of 17 worlds in her chest, not burden, but connection. Every saved life pulsed in her memory like a second heartbeat. We're not superior, Professor, she said, quietly. We just never learned to accept impossible as an answer. When evolution gave us challenges, we adapted. When disease tried to kill us, we survived. When the universe said, you can't, we said, watch us. She smiled, and in that expression lived every human who'd ever refused to let hope die. Across the galaxy, alien children learned new words: resilience, regeneration, resurrection. The Death World creatures had become the galaxy's most precious healers, turning biological impossibility into universal salvation. 10 cycles after the plague crisis, Professor Thevar stood in the Consortium Medical Academy's Hall of Biological Achievement, facing a holographic display that would have been unthinkable a decade prior. The display showed mortality statistics across 17 sectors, 73% reduction in deaths from previously incurable diseases, 847 billion lives saved, 2,147 medical facilities now operating with human-derived protocols. Colleagues, he addressed the assembled professors, his 17 eyes scanning faces from 47 species. When Zara Okafor first entered this academy, we rated humans 847th out of 12,000 species. We dismissed their biology as primitive, their regenerative capabilities as impossible. He activated another display, Zara's original cellular regeneration demonstration, the necrotic tissue coming back to life under human blood. We were wrong. The admission hung in the air like a physical presence. Not wrong about our science. Our measurements were accurate, but wrong about what those measurements meant. Thevar's voice carried weight earned through humility. We measured biological superiority by lifespan, processing speed, environmental resilience. We never measured the ability to refuse death itself. Another display activated. Zara, now Director of Interspecies Medical Innovation, surrounded by alien children learning human healing techniques. The Consortium Medical Academy hereby establishes new classification criteria. Effective immediately, biological advancement will be measured not by what a species can process or survive, but by what they can heal. 47 species watched in silence. And by that measure, Thevar concluded, humanity doesn't rank 847th, they rank first, not because they are physically superior, but because they never learned to accept death as inevitable. The Hall of Biological Achievement now bore a new inscription, visible to every medical student entering the academy. The most advanced biology isn't the one that survives best. It's the one that helps others survive. Zara Okafor, human medical pioneer. The Death World species had taught the galaxy its most important lesson. Impossible is just a word for not yet achieved.